At 8:17 a.m., death clocked out. No warning, no thunder, no final breath. Just a quiet, invisible switch, flipped somewhere behind the world. And for the first time in human history, the most terrifying thing didn't happen. Nothing ended. Imagine a city at dawn. Rain still clings to the sidewalks like a thin layer of glass. Neon signs blink in puddles. Buses hiss at the curb. Coffee steam rises in soft columns, like prayer. The skyline looks normal, too normal, because the change isn't in the buildings, it's in the air. Something has been removed like a low note in a song you didn't realize was holding everything together. In a hospital, fluorescent lights hum over white sheets. Monitors beep. Nurses move with practiced speed. A doctor stands over a patient who should be gone. The heart has stopped. The lungs don't rise. But the body doesn't cross the line. It stays. Not alive in the way we understand. Not dead in the way we feared. Just stuck. In a different room, an elderly woman closes her eyes, ready to drift. Her family holds hands, waiting for the soft ending they've rehearsed in their minds. Minutes pass, then hours. Her chest doesn't move, yet she does not leave. The world learns the news, the way it learns all news now, through a feed, through a headline, through a shaky video posted by someone with trembling hands. He was dead for 3 hours. She didn't wake up, but she's still here. Death is gone. At first, it sounds like hope. It sounds like victory. It sounds like the oldest dream finally paid off. People step outside like survivors after a storm. They look at the sky as if expecting it to look different. But it doesn't. The sun still rises with the same indifferent beauty. Light still spills over rooftops. Birds still cut through morning air like tiny arrows. Only the human heart changes shape, because the heart has always been beating toward an ending. And now, it's beating toward nothing. The first week feels like a miracle. Memorials don't happen. Funerals are canceled. Phones ring with voices that should have been silenced. A man who says goodbye to his father on Monday hears him laugh on Tuesday. A mother who has lived with dread feels her shoulders loosen for the first time in years. Cancer wards become rooms of stunned silence. Patients who were counting days stop counting. The word tomorrow becomes soft again. A teenager leans too far over a balcony, slips, falls, hits the ground hard. Screams, a crowd, hands over mouths. Then the teenager sits up, bleeding, broken, crying, but sitting up. People cheer. They call it a miracle. They call it a sign. They call it freedom. And then, because humans are humans, they test it. Street racers drive faster. Drugs are taken without fear. War zones don't slow down. They speed up. If no one can die, what stops anything? At first, crime drops in some places because the biggest punishment is gone, and so is the biggest fear. Then it spikes because consequence has lost its teeth. Hospitals fill with bodies that don't recover, not dead, not healed. People who suffer catastrophic brain injuries remain present in the most brutal way, like a radio stuck on static. Forever. A man has a heart attack in his kitchen. His family calls an ambulance. The paramedics arrive fast. They do compressions. They shock him. Nothing. In the old world, this is where the story would end, with a sheet and a silence and a phone call to relatives. In this world, they keep compressing. Because what else do you do when endings are illegal? They compress for an hour, 2 hours, 5. The paramedics swap out, exhausted, sweat darkening their uniforms. The family stands in the doorway, with eyes hollowed out by uncertainty. Finally, Someone whispers a sentence that feels like a crime. Stop, they do, and the man remains. His body cools. His skin changes color, but he does not go. His wife holds his hand and feels something worse than grief. She feels responsibility. In the old world, grief was clean in one way. It arrived after the ending. It was the price of love, paid in tears. In this new world, grief becomes a job, a caretaker role, a burden with no finish line. Families begin to whisper about the stuck ones, the ones whose suffering has no exit, the ones who can't wake up, can't breathe well, can't speak but still remain. Nursing homes become full in a different way, not with the elderly living longer, smiling longer, but with bodies that cannot complete the final step. People build entire rooms in their houses for loved ones who no longer live but won't die. And every time the kettle boils, every time a song plays, every time a child laughs, there's a shadow in the corner of the room. Not death, something worse, an unending. Then comes the second month, the moment the world realizes what it has lost. Not death as an enemy, death as a structure. Death as the wall at the end of the hallway that made life a direction. Now the hallway goes on forever, and people start to walk slower. Some stop walking at all. Because without an ending, time becomes a prison you can't measure. Dreams start to rot, not because people don't want them, because dreams require urgency. A writer used to think, I have one life. I have to finish the book. Now the writer thinks, I have infinite time. The book never gets written. A couple used to fight, then apologize, because they knew one day there might not be another chance. Now they fight and let the silence stretch for years, because what's the rush? A son delays visiting his mother, then delays again, then again, because there will always be later, until later becomes a lifestyle, and love becomes something people postpone. But even more brutal than the emotional collapse is the physical reality creeping in like fog, because death wasn't just a human thing. It was a nature thing, a recycling system, a balance, and now the balance breaks. Animals stop dying too. Roads fill with injured creatures that can't be put down. Shelters fill with pets that suffer endlessly. Farmers watch livestock collapse and remain collapsed, mouths opening and closing like broken machines. In forests, predators can't complete the act that feeds them. Prey can't complete the act that releases them. Everything gets stuck in the most horrific middle. The planet begins to feel crowded in a way that has nothing to do with population charts. It feels crowded in the way a room feels crowded when the air is used up. Food becomes a crisis, not because people suddenly eat more. Because ecosystems stop turning, nothing returns to the soil. Nothing becomes fertilizer. Nothing completes the cycle. The world had always been a circle. Now it's a line that keeps growing, a line that goes nowhere. Governments scramble, scientists work without sleep. Religions split into factions overnight, some calling it heaven, some calling it punishment, some calling it the end of meaning itself. And in the middle of all of it, ordinary people try to breathe. A nurse sits in her car after a 12-hour shift, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not from death, from its absence, she has watched suffering pile up like laundry that never stops. She has watched families beg for relief that medicine cannot provide, because medicine was built on the assumption that the body has an end. Now the body is a door that won't open and won't close. A father holds his child who drowned in a pool. In the old world, it would be the worst day of his life. Now it is the first day of the rest of his life. Because the child remains, blue lips, cold skin, not living, not leaving. The father realizes a truth so sharp it could cut through bone. There are worse things than dying. Here's the perspective shift. Death was never only the villain, it was also the editor. The limiter that gave your life shape. It cut the unnecessary scenes. It forced you to choose. It made moments matter. Without death, life doesn't become infinite, it becomes unfinished. And unfinished things don't feel like freedom. They feel like noise, like a song that never resolves, like a sentence that never ends, like a day that never turns into night. The world starts to learn something we rarely say out loud. Death is not just an ending, it's a mercy. It's the boundary that makes love urgent. It's the reason apologies happen in time. It's the reason laughter feels bright. It's the reason we hold hands a little tighter when we know we can't hold them forever. And when death disappears, humans don't become brave. They become careless, then tired, then desperate. Because the human mind was not built to carry an endless timeline. We are built to be sparks, not eternal flames. So people begin to search, not for immortality, for death. Secret groups form online, forums with coded names, whispered networks, strange pilgrimages to places where the old rules feel closer: cemeteries, battlefields, cliff edges, deep water. At first, it's denial, then it's bargaining. Then it becomes a global prayer. Not "please let me live forever," but "please let this end." Scientists chase the mechanics like hunters in the dark. Is death a process, a biological switch, a quantum event, a universal law that can be restored? But the most haunting discovery isn't in a lab. It's in the streets. It's in the way people start talking about the dead with nostalgia. In the way a funeral, once feared, starts to sound like a gift. In the way a simple, clean ending starts to feel sacred. People remember what it was like to grieve and realize grief was proof that something had meaning. Now, they feel something worse than grief. They feel flatness, a world where nothing concludes, a world where pain doesn't have a limit, a world where every goodbye is fake. So humanity arrives at the most unexpected, almost unbearable thought. We didn't need death because we hated life. We needed death because we loved life enough to want it to have a shape, enough to want suffering to stop, enough to want stories to end. Because endings are not insults, they are punctuation. They are what makes a sentence readable, and that's the irony. When death disappeared, we didn't become gods. We became prisoners of a world that could no longer let go. So one day, when death finally returned quiet, as it left, we wouldn't run from it. We'd open the door and whisper, with shaking relief, "Thank you." If this story hit you, follow for the next one and tell me in the comments, would you choose immortality if it meant no ending, ever?